The moment Evelyn Mercer's father shoved her toward the dusty ranch truck, she knew her life as a rich man's daughter was over. Disowned, humiliated, cast out to some godforsaken cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere because she dared to say no. Her crime? Refusing to marry a sleazy businessman old enough to be her grandfather. Now she's about to meet the poor farmer her father thinks will break her spirit. But what she doesn't know yet is that this punishment will become the greatest gift of her life. And the man waiting at that ranch is hiding secrets that will change everything. Stick around until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The car ride felt like a funeral procession. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the window, watching the city skyline shrink behind them until it became nothing more than a smudge on the horizon. Her father sat beside her in the back seat of his Mercedes, rigid as a statue, his jaw clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. He hadn't spoken to her in 3 days, not since the engagement dinner when she'd walked out in front of 200 guests and told Harrison Caldwell, respected businessman and her father's chosen future son-in-law, that she'd rather die alone than marry him. The silence was almost worse than the screaming had been. "You've embarrassed me for the last time," her father finally said, his voice flat and cold. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Harrison was willing to overlook your shortcomings, your weight, your ridiculous sentimentality. He was willing to take you off my hands, and you threw it back in his face." Evelyn said nothing. She'd learned years ago that defending herself only made things worse. "You think you're too good for the life I've built?" He turned to look at her, and the contempt in his eyes made her stomach twist. "Fine, let's see how you do without it." That's when he told her about the ranch. Some tenant farmer, he'd said, out in the Western Plains, owed him money, needed help with the property. She'd worked there for 6 months, manual labor, dirt, cattle, the whole degrading package, until she learned some humility and came crawling back, ready to accept whatever arrangement he saw fit to make for her future. "You'll break in a month," he'd added with absolute certainty. Maybe less. Now, 4 hours later, the paved roads had given way to gravel, then to dirt. The landscape had transformed from suburbs to farmland to something wild and endless that made Evelyn's chest feel tight. Rolling plains stretched in every direction, broken only by distant mountains that looked blue and hazy in the afternoon heat. Dust devils spun across empty fields. The sky was bigger than she'd ever seen it, pressing down like it might swallow her whole. The driver, a local man her father had hired, turned onto a narrow road marked by a weathered wooden gate. No signs, no name, just open range and a rutted track disappearing into the distance. "This is it," the driver announced. Evelyn sat up straighter, trying to see what waited for her. At first there was nothing, just endless grass and fence posts. Then buildings emerged from the heat shimmer. A large barn, dark red and solid-looking. Several smaller outbuildings, corrals with cattle moving slowly in the shade. And a house, not the shack she'd been expecting, but a real house. 2 stories with a wide porch wrapped around the front. It looked substantial, cared for. Her father leaned forward, frowning slightly like this wasn't quite what he'd anticipated either. But he recovered quickly, his expression hardening again. "Remember," he said as the car rolled to a stop in front of the house, "you stay here until I decide you've learned your lesson. You work. You do what you're told. And when you finally understand what you gave up, you call me. Not before." He didn't get out of the car. The driver opened Evelyn's door. She stepped out into heat that hit her like a physical thing, dry and relentless. Her designer shoes, stupid, expensive heels she hadn't thought to change, sank slightly into the dirt. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and she felt like an idiot. Her 2 suitcases landed in the dust beside her. 6 months, her father repeated through the open window. Then to the driver, "Let's go." Evelyn watched the Mercedes turn around, watched it drive back down that long dirt road, watched until it disappeared completely, and she was alone with nothing but the wind and the sound of cattle lowing somewhere behind the barn. She'd never felt so small in her entire life. "You gonna stand there all day, or you gonna come inside before you get heat stroke?" The voice made her jump. She spun around to find a man standing on the porch, though she hadn't heard him come out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of build that came from actual work, not gym memberships. Wore faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. Dark hair, a few days of stubble, and gray eyes that watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not contempt either, just assessment. I'm Evelyn Mercer, she managed, hating how her voice shook. My father said, I know who you are. He came down the porch steps with an easy, unhurried grace. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun. Cole Bennett, I run this place. He didn't offer to shake her hand, just looked at her expensive dress, her ridiculous shoes, the luggage that probably weighed more than she did. You ever worked on a ranch before? No. Ever worked anywhere before? The question stung because the answer was humiliating. No. Cole nodded like he'd expected as much. Well, that's going to change real fast. He picked up both suitcases like they weighed nothing. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying, then we'll get you some actual clothes. Can't have you working in that. Working. Right. That's why she was here. Evelyn followed him into the house, her heels clicking awkwardly on the wooden porch. Inside was cooler, with thick walls and high ceilings that seemed designed to fight the heat. The furniture was simple but well made, nothing like the ornate, uncomfortable pieces her father filled his house with. Everything here looked used, lived in, real. Bathrooms down the hall, Cole said, starting up the stairs. Kitchen's through there. You're hungry. There's food in the fridge. Help yourself. We eat dinner around 7, after the work's done. He led her to a small bedroom on the second floor. Clean white walls, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the plains. Simple, almost stark, but the evening light coming through that window was golden and soft, and something about the room felt safe. Cole set her suitcases down. Get changed into whatever you've got that's toughest, jeans if you have them. We'll go into town tomorrow for proper work clothes, but tonight I'll show you around, introduce you to Walter, he's my foreman, and you can get a feel for the place. Tonight? Evelyn echoed. I just got here. Cattle don't care if you just got here. He wasn't cruel about it, just matter of fact. Day starts at 5 a.m. around here. Earlier during calving season. You're going to be tired and sore and probably mad for the first couple of weeks. That's normal. Push through it. He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. Your father paid me to let you work here, Cole said quietly. Said you needed to learn some hard lessons. Told me you were spoiled and useless and would probably quit in a week. He met her eyes directly. I don't know you well enough yet to say if that's true, but I do know this. On my ranch, everybody pulls their weight. You don't get special treatment because of who your daddy is or where you came from. You work, you eat, you sleep, you work again. That's the deal. Evelyn lifted her chin, trying to find some dignity. I understand. Do you? He studied her for a long moment. We'll see. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, leaving her alone in the little room with her expensive luggage and her complete lack of preparation for anything that was about to happen. Evelyn sat down on the bed and let herself shake for exactly 1 minute. Let herself feel the fear and the humiliation and the crushing weight of being unwanted by her own father. Let it all wash over her. Then she stood up, opened her suitcase, and started digging for the one pair of jeans she'd packed. Designer, dark wash, probably useless for actual ranch work, but better than a dress. If her father thought this place would break her, he was wrong. She didn't know how yet, but she was going to prove him wrong. Nick. The tour of the ranch happened at sunset, which turned out to be both blessing and curse. Blessing because the worst heat had passed. Curse because Evelyn quickly realized she was going to be walking a lot more than she'd anticipated, and her feet were already blistering in the flat she'd changed into. Cole introduced her to Walter first, a lean, weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd been carved from old leather. He tipped his hat to her, which felt oddly formal given the circumstances, and said, "Welcome, miss. Don't worry too much. We'll get you sorted out." It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her in days, and Evelyn had to blink hard to keep from crying. The ranch itself was bigger than she'd realized. Cole walked her through the main barn, massive, with stalls for horses and equipment she couldn't begin to name. The smell of hay and animals was overwhelming at first, but not unpleasant. Just different. Real in a way her climate-controlled life had never been. We run about 500 head of cattle, Cole explained as they walked past the corrals. Mostly Black Angus, some Herefords. We breed our own stock, sell the calves, keep the best heifers for the breeding program. Evelyn nodded like she understood, even though she barely knew what a heifer was. The cattle watched them with large, disinterested eyes. They were enormous up close, massive animals that could probably kill her without trying. The thought made her keep a healthy distance from the fence. "You're going to need to get comfortable around them," Cole said, watching her reaction. "Can't do the work if you're scared." "I'm not scared," Evelyn lied. "Yeah, you are." He said it without judgment, just observation. "That's okay. Fear keeps you alert. Stupid gets you hurt." They walked further, past equipment sheds and a chicken coop where birds were settling in for the night, past a vegetable garden that looked well-tended, heavy with tomatoes and squash, past corrals and loading chutes and a dozen other things Cole named but didn't explain. "How much land is this?" Evelyn asked, looking out at the seemingly endless fence lines. "Enough," Cole said, which wasn't really an answer. Walter, who'd been following along at a distance, chuckled softly but didn't elaborate. By the time they circled back to the house, Evelyn's feet were screaming and she was struggling to hide her limp. Cole noticed anyway. Of course he did, but didn't comment. Just told her dinner would be ready in 20 minutes and she should probably take care of those blisters before tomorrow. Dinner turned out to be simple but substantial. Beef stew with fresh bread, strong coffee, and a peach cobbler that Walter had apparently made that morning. They ate at a large wooden table in the kitchen, the kind of table that seated 8 or 10 but currently held just the 3 of them. The silence was awkward at first. Evelyn had grown up with formal dinners where conversation was a performance and every word was calculated. Here, the 2 men just ate, focused on their food, seemed perfectly comfortable not talking. Finally, Walter asked, "So what did you do before this, Miss Mercer? Before coming out here?" The question was kind, but the answer was mortifying. "Nothing," Evelyn admitted quietly. "I went to charity luncheons, planned events that other people executed, attended dinners where business happened around me but never involved me." She pushed stew around her bowl. "I was decorative. That was my job." Walter said thoughtfully. "Well, out here you'll be useful. That's something." Cole glanced at her across the table, his expression unreadable. After dinner, Evelyn helped with the dishes, or tried to. She'd never washed dishes by hand before, and she made a mess of it, splashing water everywhere and not quite understanding that the dried food needed to be scrubbed, not just rinsed. Cole took over without comment, relegating her to drying while he washed. "Tomorrow," he said as he handed her a clean plate. "We start early. I'll wake you at 5. We'll feed the horses, check the cattle, fix whatever broke overnight, something always breaks, and then head into town for supplies and your work gear." "Okay," Evelyn managed. "It's going to be hard at first," Cole continued, scrubbing a pot with more force than seemed necessary. "Your body's not used to this kind of work. You're going to hurt. That's normal. Don't quit just because it hurts." "I won't quit." He looked at her then, really looked at her, with those gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "Your father said you would," Cole said quietly. "Said you've never finished anything difficult in your life." The words hit like a slap. Not because Cole was being cruel, his tone was neutral, just reporting facts, but because her father had said them. Had told this stranger that his own daughter was a quitter. Worthless. "My father," Evelyn said carefully, "doesn't know me as well as he thinks he does." "Guess we'll find out," Cole said, and went back to washing dishes. That first night, Evelyn lay in the unfamiliar bed and listened to sounds she'd never heard before. Crickets, thousands of them, creating a symphony outside her window. Some animal, a coyote maybe, howling in the distance. The house creaking and settling as the temperature dropped. She thought about her father driving away without looking back. About Harrison Caldwell and his wet, grasping hands at that dinner. About the life she'd left behind, the shopping trips and spa days and endless, hollow parties where everyone smiled and no one meant it. She thought about Cole's gray eyes and the way he'd assessed her like she was a problem to be solved. And she thought about what Walter had said. "Out here, you'll be useful." Maybe that could be enough. Maybe that could be everything. 5 a.m. came like violence. 1 second, Evelyn was deep in dreamless sleep. The next, someone was knocking hard on her door, and Cole's voice was calling, "Up, we're burning daylight." It was still dark outside. Evelyn dragged herself out of bed, every muscle already aching from yesterday's walking, and stumbled into the jeans and t-shirt she'd laid out. Her feet were a mess of blisters, but she wrapped them as best she could and forced them into the flats that had caused the damage in the first place. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like coffee. Strong, bitter coffee that tasted like it could strip paint. Cole handed her a mug without asking if she wanted it. "Drink," he ordered. "You'll need it." There was toast and eggs, eaten standing up because apparently sitting down for breakfast wasted time. Then they were outside in the pre-dawn darkness, the air surprisingly cold, walking toward the barn where the horses were already making noise, anticipating their morning feed. "You ever been around horses?" Cole asked, leading her into the barn and flipping on lights. "I took riding lessons when I was 12, Evelyn offered. "English or Western?" "English," Cole snorted softly. "Figures. Well, forget everything they taught you. These aren't show horses. They're working animals, and they'll respect you if you're confident and consistent, act scared or unsure, and they'll take advantage." He showed her how to measure out feed, where each horse's bucket went, how to check water levels in the automatic troughs. It seemed simple enough until one of the horses, a massive bay gelding named Gunner, decided to test her by crowding into her space, nearly knocking her over. "Stand your ground," Cole said from 2 stalls over. He didn't come to help, didn't intervene, just watched. "Push back on his chest, show him you're not moving." Evelyn planted her feet and shoved against the horse's muscular shoulder. Gunner snorted, tossed his head, but took a step back. "Good," Cole said. "He'll try again tomorrow, but less hard. That's how it works." After the horses came the cattle check. They loaded into a beat-up truck, Cole driving, Walter riding shotgun, Evelyn squeezed in beside them, and drove out into the pastures as the sun started painting the horizon orange and gold. The landscape looked different in the dawn light, softer somehow. The grass moved in waves under the wind, and the mountains in the distance seemed closer, more defined. It was beautiful in a way Evelyn hadn't expected, not manicured or controlled, but wild and honest. They stopped at several different pasture groups, Cole and Walter getting out to count heads and check for any cattle that looked off. At the third stop, Cole motioned for Evelyn to follow. "See that heifer?" He pointed to a black cow standing separate from the group. "What do you notice?" Evelyn studied the animal, trying to see what he saw. "She's alone?" "Good, what else?" "She's not eating?" "Better." "She's standing weird too. See how her back's humped up? And she's breathing heavy." Cole pulled out his phone and made a note. "We'll need to bring her in, check her over. Could be respiratory infection, could be hardware disease, could be a dozen things. But something's not right." "How did you know just by looking?" Cole shrugged. "Experience? You spend enough time around animals, you learn what normal looks like. Anything that deviates gets your attention." He glanced at her. "You'll learn. Takes time, but you'll get there." The casual confidence in that statement, "you'll learn," settled something in Evelyn's chest. He wasn't coddling her or lowering expectations. He was just assuming she'd figure it out. Nobody had ever assumed that before. They spent the next hour bringing the sick heifer in, which turned into a lesson in cattle handling that left Evelyn dusty, frustrated, and deeply impressed by how 2 men and 3 working dogs could move a 1,000-pound animal exactly where they wanted it to go. By the time they got back to the ranch headquarters, it was nearly 9 and Evelyn was already exhausted. But the day wasn't even close to done. "Go change your shirt," Cole told her, gesturing at the dust and mud she'd accumulated. "We're heading into town. Need to get you some actual work gear before you ruin any more of those fancy clothes." The drive into town took 40 minutes on roads that got progressively more paved. The town itself, Clearwater, population 2,800, was the kind of place Evelyn had only seen in movies. One main street with diagonal parking, brick buildings from another era, American flags on every light post, a feed store, a diner, a general store, a bar called the Watering Hole. Cole parked in front of a store called Murdoch's Ranch and Home Supply. Inside, it was overwhelming, aisles and aisles of things Evelyn couldn't identify. Feed supplements, medications, tools, fencing supplies, and in the back, clothing specifically designed for ranch work. Get yourself 3 pairs of Wranglers, Cole instructed, pointing at the jeans section. Not the fashion ones, actual work jeans. Couple of work shirts that can take abuse. A good belt, and most important, boots. Real ones, with a heel and a steel toe. A middle-aged woman appeared, someone who clearly knew Cole. "Morning, Cole. This the new hand Walter mentioned. Evelyn Mercer," Cole said by way of introduction. "Evelyn, this is Beth. She'll get you set up right." Beth looked Evelyn up and down with a practiced eye. "City girl?" "Yes, ma'am," Evelyn admitted. Well, let's get you sorted. Can't work in those clothes. You'll hurt yourself." She pulled Evelyn toward the boot section. "You're going to want something that'll last. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive, something honest." The next hour was a blur of trying on clothes that fit differently than anything Evelyn had ever worn. The jeans were stiff and rigid, designed for durability, not comfort. The shirts were thick and practical. And the boots, Lord, the boots were heavy, with a heel that felt weird to walk in and toes that felt like armor. "You'll break them in," Beth assured her when Evelyn wobbled slightly. "Give it a week. They'll mold to your feet, and you'll never want to wear anything else." At the register, Evelyn pulled out her credit card, one of the few things her father hadn't confiscated, but Cole waved it away. "Part of the deal," he said, handing over his own card. "Work clothes are on the ranch." The total made Evelyn wince, several $100s for basics, but Cole paid without blinking. Outside, loading bags into the truck, she tried to thank him. "Don't," Cole said shortly. "You're going to earn every penny of this about 10 times over in the next 6 months. Trust me." They stopped at the diner for lunch, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and Evelyn felt like an alien. Cole ordered for both of them, chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, and coffee that could probably wake the dead. "So," Cole said once the food arrived, "your father's Richard Mercer, the real estate developer." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "Heard of him. Tried to buy some land out this way a few years back." Cole cut into his steak. "Didn't work out for him." Something in the way he said it made Evelyn look up sharply, but Cole's expression was neutral, focused on his food. "He's persistent," Evelyn offered carefully. "That a polite way of saying ruthless?" "Yes." Cole nodded slowly. "And he sent you here as punishment for not marrying whoever he picked out." "Harrison Caldwell. He's 63. I'm 23. Evelyn pushed potatoes around her plate. "My father said it was a good match, that Harrison would overlook my flaws." "What flaws?" The question surprised her. She looked up to find Cole watching her with those steady gray eyes, genuinely curious. Evelyn gestured vaguely at herself. "Not what he wanted. Too soft. Too heavy. Too emotional. Not sharp enough for business. Not pretty enough to be a trophy wife. Just not enough." Cole was quiet for a long moment, and Evelyn felt her face burning with humiliation. Why had she said all that? To a stranger who was already judging her capacity for work. "Your father," Cole finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Sounds like an idiot." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Cole met her eyes directly. "I've known you less than 24 hours, and I can already tell you're smarter than he gave you credit for. You watched how Walter and I moved that heifer this morning, and by the 3rd gate you were anticipating what we needed. That's not stupid. That's observant." He took a drink of coffee, set the cup down deliberately. "As for the rest, your size, your appearance, whatever, that's got nothing to do with your capacity for work or your worth as a person. Out here we care if you're reliable, if you'll show up when it's hard, if you'll do the job right, even when nobody's watching. The rest is just noise." Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been closed and locked for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the emotion. "Just telling you the truth. Now eat. You're going to need the calories." The afternoon brought fence repair, which turned out to be exactly as tedious and backbreaking as it sounded. A section of barbed wire had come loose. Cattle had pushed against it until the staples pulled out of the posts, and it needed to be retensioned and secured before the herd could be rotated to that pasture. Walter showed Evelyn how to use the fence stretcher, how to pull the wire tight without breaking it, how to hammer staples at the right angle so they'd hold. Her hands were soft, unused to tools, and within an hour she had blisters on top of blisters. "Wear gloves tomorrow," Walter advised, noticing her wince. "Should have said something earlier." "I'll toughen up," Evelyn said, trying to sound confident. "You will," Walter agreed. "But no shame in protecting yourself while that happens. Smart work and hard work aren't the same thing." By the time they finished, 3 hours later, muscles screaming, the sun was starting to sink again. Another day almost done. Evelyn could barely believe she'd been here less than 24 hours. It felt like a week. Back at the house, Cole told her to shower and rest before dinner. "Tomorrow's going to be harder," he warned. "We're moving cattle to new pasture. That means sorting, loading, a lot of riding. You ever been on a horse for more than an hour?" "No." "You're going to be sore places you didn't know existed. Just warning you now." That night, sitting on the porch after another simple dinner, Evelyn watched the sunset paint the sky in colors she'd never seen from her father's high-rise penthouse. Out here, the sky was huge, and the light did things that seemed impossible. Turned clouds into fire, made the plains glow gold and amber. Cole came out with 2 beers, handed her one without asking. "You did okay today," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Better than I expected, honestly." "Because my father said I'd quit?" "Because most people who've never done this kind of work underestimate it. They think it's simple because it's physical, but there's skill in it. Judgment. You respected that today, didn't pretend to know things you didn't." Evelyn took a sip of beer. Cheap, cold, perfect. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you agree to this? My father paying you to let me work here. It's bizarre." Cole was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunset. "Honestly, I was curious. Your father called me personally, offered good money, talked about his daughter like she was a problem he needed to solve. Said you needed to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you." He glanced at her. But the way he talked, something felt off. Like he was punishing you for something that wasn't really a crime. "Disobedience," Evelyn said bitterly. "In his world, that's unforgivable." "In his world," Cole repeated. "But not here. Out here, thinking for yourself is pretty much required." He stood up, stretched. "Anyway, get some sleep. Tomorrow's an early one." Evelyn watched him go inside, then sat there a while longer, finishing her beer and watching darkness settle over the plains. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were calling to each other. The crickets sang their endless song. The air smelled like grass and dust and something wild she couldn't name. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, Evelyn felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, even if she had no idea what came next. The first week nearly killed her, not literally, though there were moments, face down in the dirt after being thrown from a horse or clutching fence wire with bleeding hands, when Evelyn wondered if death might actually be preferable to whatever fresh hell each morning brought. But she survived. Barely. Mostly through sheer stubbornness and the growing certainty that quitting would prove her father right about everything. By day 8, she could get out of bed without groaning. By day 10, she could hold a hammer without her hands cramping. By day 14, she stopped flinching every time a cow looked at her. Cole noticed. He didn't say much, that wasn't his way, but she caught him watching sometimes, a flicker of something that might have been approval crossing his face before he turned back to whatever task was consuming his attention. Walter was more direct. "You're tougher than you look," he told her one morning while they were mucking out stalls, a job that was exactly as glamorous as it sounded. A lot of folks would have called Daddy by now, begged to come home. Evelyn leaned on her pitchfork, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her arm. Her new work clothes were already stained and broken in, her boots scuffed but comfortable. "My father wouldn't take the call." "You sure about that?" "Positive. He made it very clear. I don't come back until he decides I've suffered enough." She returned to shoveling soiled bedding into the wheelbarrow. "Besides, I'm not ready to go back. Not to that life." Walter made a thoughtful sound but didn't push further. The physical work was one thing, exhausting, yes, but she was adapting, getting stronger. What surprised Evelyn was how much there was to learn beyond the muscle. Cattle behavior, pasture rotation schedules, equipment maintenance, the economics of breeding programs. Cole ran the operation like a business because it was a business, and gradually he started including her in decisions that went beyond simple manual labor. We've got a buyer interested in 10 bred heifers, he said one evening, spreading papers across the kitchen table after dinner. Wants them delivered next month. Question is which ones we sell. Evelyn looked at the spreadsheet he'd pushed toward her, a detailed breakdown of every female in the breeding program, their lineage, their calving history, their current status. I don't know enough to— Yes, you do, Cole interrupted. You've been working with these cattle for 2 weeks. You know which ones are easy keepers, which ones have temperament issues, which ones produce good calves. So look at the data and tell me which 10 you'd sell if it was your decision. Walter glanced up from his own paperwork, watching the exchange with interest. Evelyn studied the spreadsheet, her mind working through what she'd observed. Not number 47, she said finally. She's aggressive. Tried to charge me twice last week when I was checking water tanks. Good catch, Cole said. What else? 62 and 63. They're sisters, right? From that foundation cow you mentioned? I'd keep them. Their calves always look good, and they're both calm enough that they don't cause problems. She ran her finger down the list. But 71, maybe her. She's fine, nothing special. Good producer, but not exceptional. They went through the entire herd that way, Cole occasionally nodding or asking why she thought something, pushing her to articulate her reasoning. By the end, she'd identified 12 potential animals to sell, and Cole's final list matched 9 of them. Not bad, he said, gathering up the papers. You've got decent instincts. From Cole Bennett, that was practically a standing ovation. The ranch itself continued to puzzle her. The operation was too large, too sophisticated for what her father had described. The cattle were premium breeding stock. She'd learned enough now to recognize quality. The equipment was well maintained, but top of the line. And then there were the visits. Men in expensive trucks showed up every few days. Other ranchers, she assumed at first, until she noticed they treated Cole with a deference that seemed excessive for a peer-to-peer relationship. They called him Mr. Bennett and asked his opinion on land deals, water rights, market conditions. One afternoon, a silver Land Rover pulled up while Evelyn was replacing boards on a corral fence. A man in a suit, an actual suit out here, stepped out and shook Cole's hand like they were old friends. Bennett, good to see you. Wanted to discuss that property on the eastern section. The Morrison place? Cole wiped his hands on his jeans. Thought that was tied up in probate. Was. It's clearing. Family wants to sell. Figured you'd want first crack at it before it goes to market. They walked off toward the house, voices fading. Evelyn looked at Walter, who was helping her with the fence repair. Who was that? Real estate attorney from the city, Walter said, hammering a nail with more force than necessary. Handles Cole's acquisitions. Acquisitions? Walter gave her a long look like he was deciding something. You really don't know, do you, about this place? Know what? Before he could answer, his phone rang. He checked it, frowned. Gotta take this. We'll finish up here later. And he was gone, leaving Evelyn with the uncomfortable feeling that everyone knew something she didn't. That night, she tried searching for information on her phone, but the internet connection out here was terrible, barely functional. She managed to load a few pages about Bennett Ranch before the connection died completely, but what she found only confused her more. References to one of the region's largest agricultural operations and premier breeding program, and substantial land holdings. None of it matched her father's description of a struggling tenant farmer. She was still puzzling over it when Cole found her on the porch, squinting at her phone screen. Internet's always bad out here, he said, settling into the chair beside her. Sometimes I think about upgrading, then I remember I kind of like being disconnected. Evelyn set her phone down. Can I ask you something? You're gonna anyway. What did my father tell you exactly? About me? About why he was sending me here? Cole was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable in the dim porch light. He said you needed to learn humility, that you'd been given everything and appreciated nothing, that a few months of hard work and poverty would teach you what real life looked like. He paused. He also said this ranch was barely surviving, and I should be grateful for the money he was paying me to babysit his daughter. The words stung even though Evelyn had expected them. And you believed him? About you? No, I told you the way he talked felt wrong. Cole leaned back in his chair. About the ranch, though, that part was interesting. Your father seems to think I'm one step ahead of foreclosure. Makes me wonder why he'd send his daughter to a failing operation. Because he doesn't actually care about my safety, Evelyn said bitterly. He cares about punishment. Maybe. Cole studied her. Or maybe he doesn't know as much as he thinks he does. Before Evelyn could ask what that meant, Walter appeared in the doorway. Cole, got a minute? That heifer we treated last week, she's showing signs of respiratory distress again. Cole stood immediately. Temperature? Elevated. Already called Doc Harrison. He's on his way. They disappeared toward the barn, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts, and the growing certainty that nothing about this situation was what her father had intended. The next morning brought her first real test of horsemanship. They were moving 200 head of cattle to fresh pasture, which required riders to manage the herd and prevent breakaways. Cole handed Evelyn the reins to a sorrel mare named Penny. She's steady, he said. Won't spook easy. Just trust her. She knows this job better than you do. Evelyn mounted up, grateful for the hours she'd spent over the past weeks getting comfortable in the saddle again. Her childhood riding lessons had taught her balance and basic control, but this was different. Working cattle required partnership with the horse, reading the animals, anticipating their movements. The first hour went surprisingly well. Penny was indeed steady, responding to Evelyn's cues but also making her own decisions when necessary, cutting off a cow that tried to break from the group, positioning herself to keep the herd flowing in the right direction. Then a calf decided to bolt. 1 second the herd was moving smoothly, the next a young steer broke hard left, heading for open range at a dead run. Evelyn reacted on instinct, pressing Penny into a gallop and angling to cut off the escape route. The mare responded instantly, her muscles bunching and releasing as they ate up ground. For a few perfect seconds, Evelyn felt like she was flying. The wind in her face, the powerful animal beneath her, the simple clarity of one single objective: stop that calf. Then Penny had to swerve hard to avoid a prairie dog hole, and Evelyn's seat shifted wrong. She felt herself sliding, tried to correct, overcorrected instead, and suddenly she was airborne. She hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of her lungs, rolled twice, and came to rest staring up at the sky while her brain tried to remember how breathing worked. Hoofbeats thundered up beside her. Cole swung down from his horse before it had fully stopped, dropping to one knee beside her. Don't move! Where does it hurt? Evelyn gasped like a fish, her diaphragm spasming. Finally, air rushed back into her lungs in a painful whoosh. Everywhere, she managed. Can you move your fingers? Your toes? She wiggled both, which seemed to satisfy him. Cole slipped an arm behind her shoulders, helping her sit up slowly. Nothing broken. Don't think so. Everything hurt, but in a bruised way, not a fractured way. I'm okay. You're lucky. Cole's voice was sharp with something that might have been anger or fear or both. Could have been a lot worse. Walter appeared with Penny, who looked completely unconcerned about the whole incident. Horse is fine. Calf's fine. Just the human that's damaged. I'm fine too, Evelyn protested, even though standing up made her head swim. You're done for the day, Cole said firmly. Walter, take her back to the house. Make sure she doesn't have a concussion. I can still... That wasn't a suggestion. Cole was already back on his horse, riding toward the herd that had continued moving without them. Over his shoulder, he called, You did good, but knowing when to stop is part of the job too. Walter helped her into the truck, chattering the whole way back about falls he'd taken over the years. Apparently this was a ranching rite of passage. But Evelyn barely heard him. She was replaying those few seconds before the fall, the feeling of working with Penny, of being part of something larger than herself. She'd failed to catch the calf, yes. She'd fallen, yes. But for a moment there, she'd known exactly what she was doing, and she wanted to feel that again. The ranch had a rhythm, she discovered, a pattern that repeated with variations but maintained its essential structure. Early mornings feeding and checking animals, mid-morning repairs and maintenance, afternoons working cattle or managing pastures, evenings doing paperwork, planning, preparing for the next day. It was relentless and predictable and somehow deeply satisfying. 3 weeks in, Evelyn could feel the changes in her body. Her soft hands had developed calluses. Her arms had definition from lifting feed bags and hay bales. Her endurance had improved dramatically. She could work a full day now without feeling like she might die. But the changes went deeper than physical. She was thinking differently, seeing things she'd never noticed before. The way clouds meant rain within hours. How cattle behavior predicted weather changes. which fence sections needed attention before they became emergencies. One afternoon, she and Cole were driving back from checking the far pastures when she noticed something odd. "That truck has been behind us for the last 10 miles, she said, watching the black pickup in the side mirror. Cole glanced up, his expression shifting subtly. "Good eye. Do you know who it is?" "Yeah." He didn't elaborate, but his jaw tightened slightly. The truck followed them all the way to the ranch entrance, then kept going down the main road. Cole watched it disappear before pulling into the drive. "Someone you don't want to see?" Evelyn asked carefully. "Someone who wants something I'm not selling." He parked by the barn, killed the engine. "Land speculators. They show up every few months, testing boundaries, seeing if I've changed my mind." "About what?" Cole looked at her for a long moment, like he was making a decision. "Come on. There's something I should probably show you." He led her into the ranch office, a room in the barn she'd only glimpsed before, assumed was private. Inside was a large desk covered in papers, filing cabinets, and one wall dominated by a massive map of the region. Cole pointed to the map. Red pins marked various locations, with handwritten labels beside each one. "This," he said, gesturing to a large section marked in red, "is Bennett Ranch. What my grandfather started with 400 acres and what we've built into something significantly larger." Evelyn studied the map, her eyes widening as she traced the boundaries. The ranch wasn't just the headquarters and surrounding pastures. There were multiple sections, some connected, some separated by miles. All told, it looked like... "How much land is this?" "A little over 15,000 acres, Cole said quietly. "Give or take." The number hit Evelyn like a punch. 15,000 acres. That wasn't a small family ranch. That was a substantial agricultural operation worth, she did the math quickly in her head, millions of dollars, possibly tens of millions, depending on the land quality and improvements. "My father said..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Your father said I was a struggling tenant farmer." "Yeah." Cole crossed his arms, leaning against the desk. "That's what I figured," he thought, which seemed strange because 3 years ago he tried to buy the Morrison property I eventually acquired. We bid against each other. I won. Evelyn's mind was reeling. He never mentioned that. Wouldn't have fit his narrative. Cole pulled out a folder, opened it to reveal financial statements. "The ranch grosses about $4 million a year. We run one of the most respected breeding programs in the state. We supply genetics to operations across 3 states. This isn't poverty, Evelyn. This is a successful business that your father couldn't buy his way into, no matter how hard he tried." "Then why..." Evelyn sank into a chair, trying to process this. "Why did you agree to let me come here? If he lied about everything, if you don't need the money, I wanted to see what kind of person you were," Cole said simply. "Your father called me, offered good money to let you work here, painted you as this useless, spoiled girl who needed to be broken. And I thought, what kind of man talks about his own daughter that way? What kind of father sees hard work as punishment instead of opportunity?" He sat on the edge of the desk, his gray eyes serious. "So I said yes, partly because I was curious. Partly because I thought if you were even half as bad as he said, it'd be entertaining. But mostly because something about the whole thing felt wrong, and I wanted to understand what was really happening." "And now?" Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Now I know your father's an idiot who doesn't recognize value when it's standing right in front of him." Cole's expression softened slightly. "You're a good worker, Evelyn. You're smart, you learn fast, you don't quit when things get hard. In 3 weeks, you've become genuinely useful around here. That's not nothing." The words settled over her like a warm blanket. Useful, valuable, worth something. "Does he know?" she asked. "My father, does he know who you really are? What this place really is?" "I doubt it. Men like him don't do research on people they consider beneath them. He probably asked around enough to find a rancher willing to take you, offered money, and assumed that meant I was desperate." Cole shook his head. "The money he's paying me doesn't even cover what you eat. But watching you prove him wrong? That's worth considerably more." Evelyn laughed, a slightly shaky sound that was half sob. All this time she'd been suffering through what she thought was poverty, what she thought was her father teaching her a lesson. Instead, she'd been working on one of the most successful ranches in the region, being trained by a man who probably knew more about agriculture and business than her father ever would. The irony was almost too perfect. "Does Walter know?" she asked. "That my father lied about everything?" "Walter knows everything about this ranch. He helped build it." Cole stood, started putting papers back in order. "But we haven't talked about your situation specifically. Didn't seem appropriate to gossip. Can I ask you something else?" Cole nodded. "Why ranching? With this much land, this much capital, you could do anything. Develop it, sell it, retire, and live off the proceeds. Why keep working this hard?" Cole looked at the map on the wall, at the red sections that represented 3 generations of Bennett family history. "My grandfather came here with nothing," he said quietly. "Worked himself half to death to buy the first 400 acres. My father expanded it, improved it, turned it into a real operation. When he died, he left it to me. Not because I was his only son, but because he trusted me to keep building, keep improving." He turned back to Evelyn. "This ranch isn't just a business. It's a responsibility. To the land, to the animals, to the people who work here. You don't walk away from that just because you could." "Bury." The conviction in his voice was absolute. This wasn't a man playing rancher because it was romantic or trendy. This was someone who understood stewardship, legacy, the weight of maintaining something larger than himself. Evelyn thought about her father's empire, built on aggressive acquisitions and ruthless business practices, valued only for what it could be converted into cash. And she thought about what Cole had built. Valuable, yes, but valued for what it was, for what it sustained, for what it meant. "Thank you," she said softly, "for telling me. You deserve to know." Cole headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you can tell your father whenever you want. About the ranch, about who I really am, won't change anything on my end." But Evelyn shook her head. "No, let him keep thinking he won. Let him think I'm suffering through poverty and manual labor." A slow smile spread across her face. "I want to see his face when he finally figures out the truth." Cole's answering grin was sharp and satisfied. "Yeah, that'll be something to see." The days blurred together after that, each one building on the last. Evelyn stopped counting how long she'd been there and started thinking in terms of seasons, of cattle cycles, of planting schedules. She learned to predict weather by watching the horses' behavior. She learned which medications to use for different ailments. She learned how to read market reports and calculate profit margins. Cole included her in more business decisions, testing her judgment, trusting her with real responsibilities. When a buyer came to look at bulls, Cole had Evelyn present the genetics data and answer technical questions. When they needed to negotiate a hay contract, he brought her to the meeting and let her participate in the discussion. "You've got a head for this," he told her after they'd successfully locked in winter feed at a good price. "Better instincts than most people I've worked with." Walter agreed. "She's got her father's business sense," he observed one evening. "Without his need to crush everyone around him, that's a rare combination." The comment made Evelyn uncomfortable. She didn't like being compared to her father in any way, but she understood what Walter meant. She could see deals, could understand leverage and negotiation. But unlike her father, she also cared about the people on the other side of the table, about creating agreements that worked for everyone. 5 weeks in, something shifted between her and Cole. It was subtle at first, conversations that lasted longer than necessary, moments where their eyes would meet across a corral and hold for a beat too long. The way Cole's hand would linger on her shoulder when he was showing her something, steady and warm. The way Evelyn found herself watching him work, admiring the competence and strength in every movement. Walter noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "Careful there," he said one afternoon when Cole was out of earshot. "That's complicated territory." "I don't know what you're talking about," Evelyn protested, but her face burned. "Sure you don't." Walter's expression was kind but knowing. "Just remember, you're here temporarily. Whatever's growing between you two, make sure you both understand what happens when your father decides you've learned your lesson." The words haunted Evelyn for days. She hadn't thought about leaving. Somewhere in the last month, this place had stopped feeling like punishment or exile and started feeling like home. The work that had seemed impossible now felt natural. The people she'd been terrified of disappointing now felt like family. And Cole? Cole had become someone she couldn't imagine not seeing every day. But Walter was right. This was temporary. Her father would call eventually, would demand she return. And then what? Would she go? Could she go back to that empty life now that she'd tasted something real? The questions kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling while the house settled around her. She was still wrestling with it when the storm hit. It came out of nowhere. One minute the sky was clear, the next it was black and boiling with rage. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 15 minutes. Wind screamed across the plains, bending the grass flat and sending loose equipment flying. "Evelyn," Cole's voice cut through the wind. "Help me get the horses in." They worked frantically, leading panicked animals into the barn, while thunder shook the ground and lightning split the sky. Rain started falling in sheets, cold and violent. By the time they got the last horse secured, they were both soaked through and shivering. Cole shoved the barn door closed against the wind, threw the bolt. In the sudden relative quiet, they could hear the storm raging outside, a roar of wind and water that sounded like the world ending. "That came up fast," Evelyn gasped, wringing water from her hair. "Welcome to Plains weather." Cole was checking on the horses, talking to them in low, calm tones. "Storms like this can tear buildings apart if they catch you unprepared." A massive crack of thunder made Evelyn jump. The barn lights flickered, but held. "We're stuck here for a while," Cole said, coming back to where she stood. "Can't get back to the house in this. Visibility's zero and the lightning's too close." They settled in the tack room, which at least had chairs and some protection from the drafts. Cole found a couple of old blankets, draped one over Evelyn's shoulders. "You're shaking," he observed. "Just cold." He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Outside, the storm raged on, shaking the barn's walls but failing to breach them. In the dim light, with the world reduced to this small room and the sound of rain hammering on the roof, something felt different, smaller, more intimate. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said quietly. "Always." "Why haven't you married? Built a family? This place, it seems designed for it." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Came close once," he said finally. "Woman from the city. Met her at a conference, thought we had something. She liked the idea of ranch life, the romance of it, sunsets and horses and all that." He smiled without humor. "Lasted about 3 months before she realized the reality was early mornings and hard work and isolation. She went back to the city. I stayed here." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Better to know early than waste years on someone who doesn't really want this life." He looked at her. "What about you? Your father tried to marry you off, but was there anyone you actually cared about?" Evelyn shook her head. "Nobody real. Just men who wanted access to my father's money or connections. I was never a person to them, just a means to an end." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Harrison Caldwell was just the most blatant example. My father told me I should be grateful, that I was getting too old to be choosy, that my looks were fading, that this was probably my last chance at a good match." "You're 23, Cole said flatly. "I know. But in his world, if you're not married by 25, you're past your prime." She laughed bitterly. "And if you're not thin and perfect and willing to be decorative, you're worthless to begin with." Cole's hand found hers under the blanket, a deliberate gesture, not accidental. His palm was warm and calloused and steady. "For the record," he said quietly, "your father's world sounds like hell. And everything he told you was wrong." Evelyn turned to look at him, really look at him. His gray eyes were serious, intense, in a way that made her breath catch. "Cole?" The barn door crashed open, and Walter stumbled in, soaked and wild-eyed. "Tornado warning," he shouted over the wind. "We need to get to the storm shelter, now!" They ran. The storm shelter was buried behind the house, a concrete bunker half underground that Evelyn had noticed once and forgotten about. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her through the screaming wind, rain pelting them sideways with enough force to sting exposed skin. The air had turned green, that sickly color that meant nature was about to show exactly who was in charge. Walter reached the shelter first, yanked open the heavy steel door. They tumbled down the concrete steps into darkness, and Cole slammed the door shut behind them. The sound of the storm immediately muffled, reduced from a roar to a dull, ominous rumble. Cole fumbled for the light switch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered on, revealing a space about 12 feet square with concrete walls, shelves stocked with emergency supplies, and a battery-powered radio that Walter was already turning on. "Confirmed tornado on the ground. moving northeast at approximately 30 miles per hour. Residents in the following counties should take shelter immediately. The radio crackled and hissed, but the message was clear enough. Somewhere out there, a tornado was tearing across the plains, and they were directly in its path. "The horses," Evelyn said, her chest tight with fear. "Barn's solid," Cole said, though his jaw was clenched. "Built to withstand this. They'll be okay." "And the cattle?" "Can't do anything for them now. They're on their own." He sat heavily on one of the benches built into the wall. "We did what we could. Rest is up to luck." The three of them sat in tense silence, listening to the storm rage above them. The shelter walls were thick, but they could still hear the wind, a freight train sound that grew louder and louder until Evelyn's ears popped from the pressure change. Then something massive hit the ground above them. The shelter shook, dust raining down from the concrete ceiling. Evelyn grabbed onto the bench, her knuckles white. Cole's hand covered hers. "We're safe. This shelter survived worse." "How much worse?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "F4 back in '98 took half the original barn, killed 20 head of cattle. My father and I rode it out right here." His thumb rubbed across her knuckles, a small gesture of comfort. "We rebuilt. You always rebuild." The roaring intensified, peaked, then slowly began to fade. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. The radio continued its warnings, but the immediate danger seemed to be passing. Walter stood, pressed his ear to the door. "Wind's dropping. Think the worst is past us." "Give it another 20 minutes, Cole said. "Make sure." Those 20 minutes stretched like hours. Evelyn became acutely aware of how close she was sitting to Cole. Their shoulders pressed together on the narrow bench. The fear had sharpened everything, made every breath feel significant, every heartbeat loud in her ears. "You did good out there," Cole said quietly. "Getting the horses in. A lot of people freeze up when weather turns that fast." "I was terrified." "Yeah, but you moved anyway. That's what counts." He was still holding her hand, she realized. Neither of them had let go. "You've changed a lot in 6 weeks. Barely recognized the woman who showed up in a fancy dress and heels." "That woman feels like someone else entirely," Evelyn admitted. "Like a costume I wore because I didn't know there were other options. And now? Now I know there are other ways to be. Other ways to live." She looked at him, at the strong profile in the gray eyes that had watched her transform from useless to capable. Better ways. The air in the shelter felt charged with something that had nothing to do with the storm. Walter cleared his throat pointedly, studying the emergency supplies with sudden intense interest. Finally, Cole stood and opened the door. The wind had died to a breeze, the rain reduced to a drizzle. The sky was still dark, but the green had faded to ordinary storm gray. They emerged to devastation. Not total, the house still stood, the barn was intact, but the landscape had been rearranged. A section of fence was completely gone, posts ripped from the ground and scattered like matchsticks. One of the equipment sheds had lost its roof, which was now wrapped around a tree 100 yards away. Debris littered the yard, branches, twisted metal, things Evelyn couldn't identify. And in the distance, they could see the tornado's path, a dark scar across the grassland where everything had been flattened. "Could have been worse," Walter said, which seemed like an understatement. They spent the next hour doing damage assessment. The horses were spooked but unharmed. The cattle in the near pastures were accounted for, though scattered. The far pastures would need to be checked at first light. Structurally, the main buildings had held, though there was cleanup and repair work that would take days. By the time they made it back to the house, exhausted and still soaked through, it was nearly midnight. Walter headed to his cabin, a small building behind the main house, leaving Evelyn and Cole alone in the kitchen. "You should get dry clothes," Cole said, wringing water from his shirt into the sink. "Hot shower if you want it. Gonna be a long day tomorrow dealing with all this." Evelyn nodded, but didn't move. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and strange. "Cole?" He turned to look at her. "Thank you for keeping me safe, for—" She gestured helplessly. "For everything." Something shifted in his expression. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, and suddenly his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up toward him. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could feel it. Okay. Your father sent you here to break you, to make you desperate enough to accept whatever life he decided you deserved. But that's not what happened. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, a touch so gentle it made her throat tight. What happened is you became someone remarkable, someone strong and capable and real. And I... He stopped, seemed to be fighting with himself. You what? Evelyn whispered. I'm falling for you, Cole said bluntly. Have been for weeks, probably. And I know that's complicated because you're supposed to leave eventually, because your father's paying me, because this whole situation is messed up. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it. Evelyn's breath caught. I feel it too, she admitted. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But every day I'm here, every moment I spend with you, it just gets stronger. Cole's forehead dropped to rest against hers. This is a terrible idea. Probably. Your father's going to lose his mind when he finds out. Definitely. And you deserve better than a rancher who spends most of his time covered in dirt and cattle. Evelyn kissed him, just rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, cutting off whatever self-deprecating thing he was about to say. He froze for half a second, then kissed her back with an intensity that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole's eyes were dark and fierce. Stay, he said. When your father calls, when he says you can come home, don't go. Stay here. With me. Cole, I know it's too soon. I know you need time to figure out what you want, who you are outside of his shadow. I'm not asking you to decide right now. His hand slid down to her shoulders, steadying. I'm just asking you to think about it, about what a life here could look like. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. Then she pulled away gently, headed for the stairs. At the doorway, she looked back. For what it's worth, she said softly, I'm already thinking about it. Have been for weeks. The smile that crossed Cole's face was worth everything. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of repair work, regular ranch operations, and a growing connection between Evelyn and Cole that neither of them bothered to hide anymore. Walter watched them with knowing amusement, but kept his commentary to himself. The ranch settled back into its rhythm, stronger for having survived the storm. Evelyn found herself taking on more responsibilities, managing supply orders, coordinating with buyers, even handling some of the bookkeeping. Cole trusted her judgment now, treated her like a partner rather than a student. And every night after the work was done, they'd sit on the porch and talk about the ranch, about the future, about dreams and fears and all the things that made them who they were. Sometimes Cole would reach for her hand. Sometimes she'd lean against his shoulder. They didn't rush anything. Both of them seemed to understand that what they were building needed a solid foundation. Then, on a Tuesday morning, exactly 8 weeks after Evelyn's arrival, her phone rang. She was in the barn, helping Walter reorganize the tack room, when she felt it buzz in her pocket. The number made her stomach drop. Her father. I need to take this, she said to Walter, stepping outside into the morning sun. She let it ring 3 more times, gathering her courage, then answered. Hello, Father. Evelyn? His voice was as cold and controlled as she remembered. I trust these past 2 months have been educational. Very, she said carefully. Good. I've made arrangements for you to return home this weekend. A car will pick you up Saturday morning. Pack your things. Just like that. No asking if she'd learned her lesson, no discussion, just commands, issued with the absolute certainty that she'd obey. 2 months ago, she would have packed meekly and returned to the cage she'd escaped from, grateful to be allowed back in. But that woman was gone. No, Evelyn said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, excuse me? I said no, I'm not coming home. I'm staying here. Her father's laugh was sharp and humorless. Don't be ridiculous. You've had your little adventure, suffered your punishment. It's time to return to reality. This is reality, Father, more real than anything in your world ever was. Evelyn's hand was shaking, but her voice stayed steady. I'm staying. I have work here, responsibilities, a life that actually means something. Work? The contempt in his voice was palpable. You think mucking out stalls and hauling hay is a life? You think that dirt-poor farmer is going to call... Cole Bennett isn't poor, Evelyn interrupted. He owns one of the largest and most successful agricultural operations in this region. 15,000 acres, multi-million-dollar gross revenue. He's probably worth more than you are, actually. The silence that followed was deafening. What did you say? Her father's voice had gone very quiet, very dangerous. You didn't do your research, did you? You just assumed that because he works with his hands, he must be desperate. But he's not. He never was. You paid him to let me work here, and he took your money because he was curious about what kind of father would send his daughter away as punishment. Turns out, he saw value in me that you never did. You're lying, her father said, but there was uncertainty there now. That ranch is barely... I can send you the financial statements if you want. Public record for the corporate structure. Or you could just admit that you sent me here to break me, and instead you handed me the keys to a better life. Evelyn felt power surging through her, the power of finally speaking truth. I'm not coming back. I'm done being your disappointment. I'm staying here where I'm valued for what I can do, not judged for what I'm not. Evelyn Marie Mercer, if you hang up this phone, goodbye, Father. She ended the call, then immediately blocked the number. Her hands were shaking badly now, adrenaline flooding her system. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Cole appeared from around the barn, concern etched on his face. I heard. Are you? Evelyn launched herself at him, wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him hard. He caught her, held her, kissed her back until they were both breathless. I'm staying, she said against his lips. If you'll have me. If there's really a place for me here, there's a place for you everywhere, Cole said fiercely. In the business, on this ranch, in my life, anywhere you want to be. Then I choose here. I choose this. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I choose you. The smile that spread across Cole's face was pure joy. He lifted her off her feet, spun her around, and she laughed. Actually laughed. Free and unrestrained in a way she'd never felt before. Walter emerged from the barn, took one look at them, and shook his head with a grin. About damn time, he muttered. I'll give you two a minute, but we've got work to do, so don't take too long getting mushy about it. They didn't take long. There was work to do, always work to do. But everything felt different now, lighter, full of possibility. That night, over dinner, which Evelyn had learned to cook, simple ranch meals that were 1,000 times better than the fancy restaurant food she'd grown up with, Cole brought up the future. I want to make you a partner, he said. Not just in sentiment, legally, in the business. Evelyn set down her fork. Cole, you don't have to... I know I don't have to. I want to. You've earned it. He pulled out a folder, spread papers across the table. I talked to my lawyer today. We can structure it as a partnership, give you equity stake in the operation. You'd have real ownership, real decision-making power. Not because you're whatever we are to each other, but because you've proven you can run this place. She stared at the documents, her vision blurring slightly. This is too much. It's exactly right, Cole countered. I've been running this ranch alone for 5 years since my father died. It's been successful, yeah, but it's been lonely. I never had anyone I could trust with the big decisions, anyone who understood both the business side and the land side. You get both. You've got instincts I trust, and you give a damn about doing things right, not just profitable. What about, Evelyn gestured vaguely, us, what we're becoming? Doesn't that complicate it? Probably, Cole admitted, but we're both adults. We can separate business from personal when we need to, and honestly, I can't think of anyone I'd rather build something with. Evelyn read through the documents, her business education finally proving useful. The terms were generous but not unreasonable. 20% equity to start, with pathways to increase it based on performance and investment. Full partnership and management decisions. Legal protection of her interests. It was the kind of opportunity her father had never offered her. Real power, real responsibility, real trust. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. They shook hands across the table, formal and businesslike. Then Cole grinned and pulled her around to his side, kissing her until the papers scattered to the floor. Business meeting adjourned? Evelyn asked breathlessly. For now, Cole agreed. The partnership changed things, but not in the ways Evelyn had feared. Instead of creating awkwardness, it clarified their relationship. During work hours, they were business partners, equals who challenged each other, disagreed sometimes, but ultimately respected each other's judgment. After hours, they were something else. Something still developing, still being defined. Evelyn threw herself into the work with new intensity now that she had genuine ownership. She started researching new markets for their breeding stock, found buyers in adjacent states willing to pay premium prices for Bennett genetics. She negotiated a contract with a major feed supplier that saved them 15% annually. She even hired a marketing consultant to help build their brand, something Cole had never thought about, but immediately saw the value in. "We could be selling these genetics for 30% more if people understood what we're producing," she explained, showing him mock-ups of a new website and marketing materials. "Right now, we're letting our reputation do the work. But if we actively manage our brand, we can expand into new markets." Cole studied the materials, nodding slowly. "Your father really is an idiot," he said finally. "You've got a better head for business than half the people I know, and he wanted to marry you off to some old fool who'd keep you decorative and quiet." "Guess it's his loss," Evelyn said, but there was still a tiny part of her that ached, that wished her father could have seen her value the way Cole did. 2 days later, she found out he was coming. Walter took the call from a ranch hand who lived closer to town. "Black Mercedes just went through Clearwater," he reported after hanging up, "asking directions to our place. Fits the description of Evelyn's father." Cole's expression went hard. "He doesn't give up easy, does he?" "What do I do?" Evelyn asked, her stomach churning. "Whatever you want," Cole said firmly. "This is your home now. You want him gone? I'll send him packing. You want to talk to him? We'll talk to him. Your call." Evelyn thought about it. Part of her wanted to hide, to avoid the confrontation entirely, but she'd spent too many years being afraid of her father's judgment, his disappointment. Not anymore. "I'll talk to him," she decided, "but not alone. I want you there." "Wouldn't be anywhere else," Cole promised. They were waiting on the porch when the Mercedes rolled up the drive 40 minutes later. Her father emerged looking exactly as she remembered. Expensive suit, cold expression, the bearing of a man who expected the world to rearrange itself for his convenience. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes widening slightly. Evelyn knew what he was seeing, his daughter in work jeans and scuffed boots, her skin tanned from hours in the sun, her body leaner and stronger than it had ever been. Standing shoulder to shoulder with a man in dusty work clothes who looked at her like she was the most valuable thing on the ranch. "Evelyn," her father said, "I think we need to talk." "Then talk," Evelyn replied, not moving from the porch. Her father's gaze shifted to Cole, dismissive and contemptuous. "Alone?" "No," Evelyn said simply. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Cole. He's my business partner." "Business partner," her father repeated, the words dripping with disbelief. "You expect me to believe—" "I don't care what you believe," Evelyn interrupted, and the words felt like freedom. "I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your money or your connections or your permission to live my life." Her father's jaw tightened. "You're being manipulated. This man—" He gestured at Cole like he was something distasteful. "Convinced you to stay here? Convinced you that you have some kind of future in this—" He looked around with obvious disdain. "This poverty operation." "Poverty?" Cole spoke for the first time, his voice dangerously calm. "That's interesting, because the land you're standing on is worth about $40 million at current market rates. The cattle operation grosses $4 million annually with a 30% profit margin. And the breeding program we run supplies genetics to some of the top ranches in 3 states. So I'm curious what poverty you're seeing." Richard Mercer's face went very still. "You're lying. Public records," Cole said with a shrug. "Feel free to check. Or you could ask around town. People know who I am, what I've built." He stepped forward, not threatening, but absolutely solid. "You came here thinking you'd sent your daughter to suffer with some struggling farmer. Instead, you accidentally introduced her to someone who recognized her value. Someone who gave her real responsibility instead of pretty decorations to hang on the wall." Richard Mercer's face went through a series of transformations. Disbelief, calculation, and finally a cold fury that Evelyn recognized all too well. But this time, standing on Cole's porch with the late afternoon sun warming her shoulders and solid ground beneath her boots, she didn't flinch from it. "You researched me," her father said to Cole, accusation sharp in his voice. "Didn't have to. You tried to buy the Morrison property from me 3 years ago. Lost the bid by $200,000. Cole's expression remained neutral, but Evelyn caught the slight edge to his words. "Most people in the regional ag business know who I am. You just never bothered to check because you assumed anyone working a ranch had to be desperate." Her father's eyes narrowed. That was you? Bennett Agricultural Holdings? Family business? My grandfather started it, my father built it up, and I've been expanding it for the last 5 years. Cole crossed his arms. So when you called offering money to let your daughter work here as punishment, I was curious what kind of man would go to those lengths to humiliate his own child. Humiliate? Richard's voice rose. I was trying to teach her reality. She refused a perfectly good marriage arrangement to a man of standing, a 63-year-old man who wanted a trophy wife young enough to be his granddaughter, Evelyn cut in, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. Harrison Caldwell has been married twice before, both times to women he discarded when they got older. He wanted me because I'd be easy to control, because you told him I would be. I was securing your future. You were selling me. The words came out flat and hard, like a business asset you wanted to liquidate. And when I said no, when I dared to have an opinion about my own life, you sent me away to break me, to make me so desperate I'd accept anything just to escape. Richard's jaw clenched. You have no idea what I sacrificed to build our family's position. The opportunities I've created for you. For you, Evelyn corrected. Everything was always for you. Your reputation, your business deals, your standing in a world that values money over everything else. She took a step forward, and this time her father was the one who shifted back slightly. But out here, I learned something. Real value isn't about how much you're worth on paper. It's about what you build, what you sustain, who you help along the way. Spare me the frontier philosophy, her father snapped. You think 2 months of playing farmhand makes you some kind of expert on life? You're still my daughter. You're still financially dependent on me. Actually, I'm not. Evelyn felt Cole's presence at her back, solid and supportive. Cole made me a partner in the ranch, 20% equity, full management authority. I have my own income now, my own assets. I don't need your money anymore. The shock on her father's face would have been satisfying if it wasn't also heartbreaking. He genuinely couldn't comprehend that someone would value her enough to give her real power. This is insane, Richard said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. You can't just, you're throwing away your entire life for some rancher you barely know. I know him better than I ever knew the people in your world, Evelyn said quietly. He's honest. He works hard. He treats people with respect instead of using them as stepping stones. And he saw potential in me that you never bothered to look for. Potential? Her father's laugh was bitter. What potential? You have no education in agriculture, no experience running a business. She's increased our profit margin by 12% in 2 months, Cole said, his voice cutting through Richard's protests. Found new markets for our genetics, negotiated better supplier contracts, developed a marketing strategy that's already generating inquiries from buyers we've never worked with before. She's got better business instincts than most people I've partnered with over the years. And unlike some people, Evelyn added, meeting her father's eyes directly, I didn't have to crush anyone to be successful. I didn't have to manipulate or intimidate or buy my way into respect. I earned it. Richard stood there, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place against the backdrop of corrals and cattle. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Evelyn could see him calculating, trying to find an angle, a weakness he could exploit. How much? He finally asked Cole. Excuse me? How much to dissolve this partnership? Name your price. Whatever you've invested in her, I'll double it. The words landed like a slap. After everything, after hearing what Evelyn had accomplished, her father still thought it was just about money, still thought he could buy his way out of consequences. Cole's expression went ice cold. She's not for sale. This isn't a transaction you can negotiate your way out of. Everything's for sale, Richard countered, turning his full attention to Cole now. You're a businessman. You understand leverage. I can make things very difficult for your operation if you continue to threaten me? Cole's voice dropped to something dangerous. Go ahead, try. You've got real estate holdings and development projects. I've got water rights, land access, and relationships with every major agricultural operation within 200 miles. You want to start a war, Mr. Mercer? You'll lose. Evelyn watched her father's face flush with rage. He wasn't used to being challenged, wasn't used to people who couldn't be bought or intimidated. You're making a mistake, Richard said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Both of you, Evelyn, when this fantasy falls apart, and it will, don't come crawling back expecting me to fix it. I won't, Evelyn said simply. Because it's not a fantasy. This is the first real thing I've ever had. Her father stared at her for a long, cold moment. Then he turned and walked back to his car without another word. The Mercedes roared to life, spraying gravel as he accelerated down the drive, and Evelyn watched until the dust settled and the sound of the engine faded completely. Then her knees gave out. Cole caught her before she hit the porch, guided her to sit on the steps. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Just breathe." Evelyn sucked in air, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "I can't believe I just did that." "You were amazing," Cole said, sitting beside her. "You didn't back down once." "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That's normal. First time standing up to a bully is always rough." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, solid and warm. "But you did it. You told him the truth, and you didn't let him make you small." Walter appeared from the barn, where he'd obviously been watching the whole confrontation. "That man's a piece of work," he observed. "But you handled him just right, Miss Evelyn. Proud of you." The simple words made Evelyn's eyes burn with tears she'd been holding back. "Thank you," she managed. "Now," Walter continued, his tone deliberately light, "we've got 30 head that need to be rotated to the south pasture before dark, and I could use both of you. Best thing for shaky nerves is honest work." He was right. An hour later, working with Cole and Walter to move cattle through the gate system they'd set up, Evelyn felt steady again. Centered, the work demanded focus, left no room for dwelling on her father's anger or the bridge she'd just burned. That night, after the cattle were settled and dinner was finished, Evelyn found herself alone with Cole on the porch again. It had become their ritual, these quiet evening conversations while the sun set and the day's work faded into memory. "Do you regret it?" Cole asked, handing her a beer. "Standing up to him like that?" Evelyn considered this question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I'm scared of what it means, of being completely cut off from my old life. But I don't regret it. For the first time, I feel like I'm living my own story instead of a role he wrote for me." "He might try to make trouble," Cole warned. "Men like that don't take rejection well." "Let him try." Evelyn took a sip of beer, savoring the cold bitterness. "I'm not going back. Whatever happens, I'm staying here." Cole was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening plains. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "What do you see when you look at this place now? Is it still punishment, or It was never punishment," Evelyn interrupted. "Not really. It was the first time anyone expected me to be capable instead of decorative. The first time I had to prove myself with work instead of appearances." She turned to look at him. "When I look at this place now, I see home. I see purpose. I see a future worth building." The smile that crossed Cole's face was soft and genuine. "Good. Because I want you to know, partnership papers aside, you belong here. Not because I gave you equity or because you're useful to the business, but because this is where you should be." Evelyn set down her beer and kissed him, slow and deliberate. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said quietly. The words felt huge, terrifying, absolutely true. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I need you to know." Cole's hand came up to cup her cheek. "I love you too. Have for weeks, probably. Just didn't want to scare you off by saying it." They sat there in the gathering darkness, wrapped around each other, while the first stars appeared overhead. The future was uncertain. Her father would undoubtedly try something, and building a life together would have its own challenges. But for now, this was enough, more than enough. The next morning brought a surprise visitor, not Richard Mercer returning for round 2, but a woman in her early 40s who introduced herself as Patricia Morrison. "I'm handling my late uncle's estate," she explained, standing in the ranch office, while Cole and Evelyn reviewed feed orders. "The property adjacent to your eastern boundary. My lawyer said you'd expressed interest in acquiring it." Cole straightened immediately. "The Morrison place." "Yes, I've been interested for years. Your uncle and I had talked about a potential sale before he passed." "Well, the estate's cleared probate now and we're ready to move forward." Patricia pulled out a folder. "I've got 3 offers already, but Uncle Jack specifically mentioned in his notes that he wanted you to have first option if anything happened to him." The property in question was 1,200 acres of prime grazing land with excellent water access, something Cole had mentioned wanting to acquire to consolidate the ranch's holdings. Evelyn had seen it marked on the map in the office, a strategic piece that would eliminate a gap in their current boundaries. What are the other offers? Evelyn asked, her business instincts kicking in. Patricia named a figure that made Cole wince slightly. Developer out of the city wants to subdivide it for luxury ranch estates. That's ridiculous, Evelyn said immediately. That land's been working ranch property for generations. Subdividing it would destroy the watershed, fragment the grazing patterns, and… She stopped, realizing both Patricia and Cole were staring at her. Sorry, it would be a waste. No, you're right, Patricia said, looking impressed. That's exactly what I think, but I have a fiduciary duty to the estate and that offer is substantial. Who made it? Evelyn asked, though she already suspected. Mercer Development Corporation. Of course, her father trying to hurt Cole by buying out land he needed, trying to prove he still had power, still had control. Cole's jaw tightened. I can match the offer, he said quietly, but it'll stretch us thin. We'd have to delay some other improvements, pull from our reserve capital. No, Evelyn said, her mind already working through alternatives. We don't match it. We beat it with better terms. Both Cole and Patricia looked at her. Your fiduciary duty is to get the best deal for the estate, Evelyn continued, looking at Patricia. But best doesn't just mean highest dollar amount. It also means certainty of close, terms of payment, an ongoing relationship if there are any easement issues or boundary questions. She pulled out a notepad, started sketching out numbers. We offer 5% under the developer's price, but all cash, close in 30 days instead of the typical 60 to 90. No contingencies, no inspection periods that could delay or kill the deal. We also offer a right of first refusal if you or other family members ever want to sell any remaining Morrison holdings in the area. Cole was watching her with something like awe. Patricia considered it. The certainty is worth something, she admitted. My cousins want this settled fast so we can distribute the estate. And honestly, Uncle Jack would haunt me if I let developers carve up his ranch. She looked at Cole. You can really close in 30 days? If Evelyn says we can, Cole said without hesitation. They spent the next 2 hours hammering out details. By the time Patricia left, they had a handshake agreement pending formal paperwork, and Evelyn's head was spinning with the logistics of pulling together that much capital in 30 days. That was incredible, Cole said once they were alone. The way you structured that deal. It's going to be tight, Evelyn warned. We'll need to accelerate some cattle sales, possibly take a short-term loan to bridge the gap until those sales close. Cole pulled her into a kiss that cut off the rest of her tactical analysis. When he let her go, she was breathless. What was that for? For being brilliant, for seeing the angle I missed, he gestured helplessly, for being you. Over the next 4 weeks, they worked around the clock to make the Morrison deal happen. Evelyn coordinated cattle sales with 3 different buyers, negotiated payment terms that got them cash up front instead of the typical 30-day delays, and structured a bridge loan with their bank that gave them the liquidity they needed without crippling their cash flow. Cole handled the operational side, making sure the ranch kept functioning while they juggled the acquisition, managing the details of due diligence on the Morrison property, coordinating with their lawyer on purchase documents. Walter watched them work together with obvious satisfaction. You two are like a machine, he commented one evening when they were all reviewing final numbers. Never seen a partnership click like this. She makes me better, Cole said simply. Challenges me to think bigger. You make me braver, Evelyn countered. You trusted me with real responsibility when no one else would. Walter rolled his eyes. You're both ridiculous. Now finish those projections so we can all get some sleep. The deal closed on day 29. Patricia Morrison signed the deed transfer in Cole's office, accepted the cashier's check, and shook both their hands. Uncle Jack would have liked you, she told Evelyn. He always said ranching needed more people who understood it was a business, not just a lifestyle. After she left, Cole pulled Evelyn into his arms. We did it, he said, his voice full of wonder. 1,200 acres, water rights, everything. We did, Evelyn agreed. Then, quieter. My father's going to be furious. Good, Cole said bluntly. Let him be. He tried to use money as a weapon, and you countered with better strategy. That's going to eat at him. It did. 3 days later, Evelyn received a letter. Not a phone call, not an email, but an actual formal letter delivered by courier. She read it twice, her stomach sinking, then handed it to Cole without a word. The letter was from her father's attorney. It informed her that Richard Mercer was formally disowning her, cutting her out of his will, removing her from all family trusts, severing all legal and financial ties. She had 30 days to remove her belongings from the family home, or they would be discarded. The letter ended with a paragraph that made Evelyn's hands shake. Furthermore, be advised that Mr. Mercer intends to pursue all available legal remedies regarding your current living situation, including potential investigation into whether undue influence or coercion was involved in your decision to remain at Bennett Ranch and accept partnership in said operation. He's threatening to claim I manipulated you, Cole said, his voice tight with controlled fury. That's what that legal language means. He's going to try to paint this as me taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. That's insane, Evelyn said. No one would believe. Your father's rich and connected. He can make it messy, even if he can't win. Cole set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. This is my fault. I should have seen this coming. Should have... Stop. Evelyn grabbed his hands. This is not your fault. This is my father being exactly who he's always been. A man who can't accept that he doesn't control everything. She took a deep breath. We knew this might happen. We can handle it. How? We document everything. Every business decision I've made, every dollar I've earned, every bit of equity I've received. We show it's all legitimate, all based on actual work and actual value created. Her mind was already racing ahead, building the defense. We get character witnesses from people we've worked with. We show the timeline of our relationship versus the partnership. We make it impossible for him to claim coercion. Cole pulled her close. You shouldn't have to fight your own father like this. I know, but I'm going to fight. Evelyn looked up at him. Because what we've built here is worth protecting. You're worth protecting. They spent that evening compiling documentation, partnership agreements, bank statements showing Evelyn's separate accounts and income, emails and texts showing the business decisions she'd made independently. Walter provided a detailed timeline of her work on the ranch, her growing responsibilities, the value she'd added. If it comes to it, Walter said, I'll testify. So will every hand who's worked with you. They've all seen how hard you work, how much you've learned. It won't come to that, Cole said, but he sounded less certain than Evelyn would have liked. 2 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. A private investigator showed up asking questions around town about Evelyn, about Cole, about their relationship and the business arrangement. The man was subtle, but in a town the size of Clearwater, everyone noticed and everyone talked. He's building a case, Cole said after the third person mentioned being questioned. Your father's going to try to prove I'm some kind of predator who took advantage of you. Let him try, Evelyn said, but fear was coiling in her stomach. We've got documentation. We've got witnesses. Your father's got money and lawyers and connections, Cole interrupted. And the optics aren't great, Evelyn. Rich man's daughter, sent to work as punishment, ends up in a relationship with the ranch owner and gets made a partner. I can see how he'll spin it. So what are you saying? Evelyn's voice came out sharper than she intended. That we should end the partnership? End us? No. Cole's response was immediate and fierce. I'm saying we need to be smart about this. We need to protect you legally in case this goes sideways. They hired their own lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine Torres, who specialized in business disputes and family law. She reviewed everything, interviewed both Cole and Evelyn extensively, and finally delivered her assessment. Legally, you're on solid ground, Catherine said. The partnership is legitimate, the compensation is reasonable, and you've clearly added substantial value to the operation. But your father's going to make this about the personal relationship, not the business one. He's going to claim Cole manipulated you emotionally to get you to sign over your trust fund or inheritance rights. I don't have access to my trust fund anymore, Evelyn pointed out. He cut me off. Exactly. Which he'll claim as evidence of you being under undue influence, that you gave up your inheritance because you were being controlled. Catherine leaned back in her chair. Look, I don't think he'll win if this goes to court, but he can make it expensive and ugly, drag it out for years, damage both your reputations, tie up the ranch in litigation. What's the alternative? So Cole asked. Settlement. He wants you gone, Evelyn. He wants to be able to say his daughter came to her senses and left. You give him that narrative, he might back off. The suggestion hung in the air like poison. No, Evelyn said immediately. I'm not leaving. I'm not giving him what he wants. Even if fighting costs you everything? Catherine's expression was sympathetic but realistic. Even if it damages the ranch, hurts Cole's business, drags this out for years? Evelyn looked at Cole, searching his face. What do you want me to do? I want you to stay, Cole said quietly, but not if it destroys you. Not if fighting your father costs you more than it's worth. You're worth fighting for, Evelyn said fiercely. This place is worth fighting for. The life we're building, that's worth every bit of ugliness my father can throw at us. Cole's hand found hers across the table. Then we fight. Catherine nodded slowly. All right. Then we prepare for war, because that's what this is going to be. The next 3 months were brutal. Her father's lawyers filed preliminary motions in court. Nothing that went anywhere, but enough to create a paper trail suggesting concern for Evelyn's well-being. The private investigator continued digging, though he found nothing because there was nothing to find. People in town started treating Evelyn differently, some with sympathy, some with suspicion, all with the uncomfortable awareness of being caught in someone else's family drama. Through it all, Evelyn and Cole kept working. The ranch needed attention regardless of legal battles. Cattle didn't care about lawsuits. Fences still needed repair. Contracts still needed to be negotiated and fulfilled. But the stress was taking its toll. Evelyn started losing sleep, lying awake at night worrying about what her father might try next. Cole became quieter, more withdrawn, clearly blaming himself even though Evelyn told him repeatedly that none of this was his fault. The easy intimacy they'd built started developing cracks under the pressure. One night, after a particularly brutal day where Evelyn had been deposed by her father's lawyers for 6 hours straight, she found Cole in the barn working on a tractor that didn't need fixing. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "Nothing to talk about." He didn't look up from the engine he was pointlessly adjusting. "Cole, please." He finally stopped, set down his wrench. "I'm watching you suffer because of me. Because you stayed here, because you chose this life. And I hate it. I hate that loving me is costing you your family." "He stopped being my family the minute he sent me here as punishment," Evelyn cut in. "You became my family. Walter became my family. This place, this life, that's my family now. But if I hadn't made you a partner, then I wouldn't have the equity and income that make me independent," Evelyn finished. "Cole, you gave me power, real power over my own life. Yes, my father's trying to punish me for using it, but that doesn't mean you were wrong to give it to me." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel him shaking. "I just want this to be over. Want to get back to us, to building this place together, without all this hanging over our heads." "It will be," Evelyn promised, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "My father will run out of legal options eventually, and when he does, we'll still be here, still standing." But the cost of standing kept climbing. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late autumn, 6 months after Evelyn had first arrived at the ranch. Catherine Torres called with news that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Her father had found a new angle. He was threatening to file a lawsuit, not just against Evelyn, but against the ranch itself, claiming that Cole had essentially stolen his daughter through emotional manipulation and that the partnership agreement was fraudulent. The legal theory was shaky at best, but it would tie up the ranch's assets in court for years. "He's not trying to win," Catherine explained, her voice tight with frustration. "He's trying to bleed you dry, force you to settle by making it too expensive to fight." Evelyn hung up and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Outside, she could hear Cole and Walter working with the cattle, their voices carrying across the yard. Normal ranch sounds on a normal day, except nothing was normal anymore. Her father was going to destroy this place. Destroy Cole. Destroy everything they'd built together. All because she dared to choose her own life. When Cole came in for lunch, he took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Evelyn told him. Watched his expression go from concerned to furious to resigned in the space of 30 seconds. "So that's it," he said flatly. "He's going scorched earth. Catherine says we can still fight it." "With what money, Evelyn?" Cole's voice was sharper than she'd ever heard it. "We've already spent $30,000 in legal fees. The Morrison property acquisition took most of our liquid capital. If we have to defend against a lawsuit targeting the ranch itself, we're looking at hundreds of thousands, maybe more." He sat down heavily across from her. "I won't let him destroy what 3 generations of my family built just because he can't accept losing." "So what are you saying?" Cole met her eyes, and what she saw there made her chest constrict. I'm saying maybe we need to consider settling. Give him what he wants. You mean give him me? Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, protect the ranch. Protect Walter, and the hands who depend on this place for their livelihood. Protect everything my grandfather and father died building. His hands were clenched into fists on the table. I love you, Evelyn, but I can't let loving you cost dozens of people their jobs and their homes. The words hit like bullets. Evelyn stood up, her chair scraping harsh against the floor. So that's it? 6 months of telling me I belong here, of making me believe I was worth fighting for, and the second things get hard, you're ready to send me back? That's not fair. Fair. Evelyn's voice rose. You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything for this. My family, my inheritance, my entire past life. I fought my father, stood up to him for the first time in my life, because you made me believe there was something here worth fighting for. And now you're telling me it was all conditional? That I'm only worth keeping around if it doesn't cost too much? Evelyn? No. She was shaking now, tears burning hot behind her eyes. You don't get to make me feel valuable and then treat me like a liability the minute things get complicated. She turned and walked out, not caring that she was still in her house slippers, not caring about anything except getting away from the look on Cole's face that said he'd already made his decision. She ended up in the barn, in the tack room where she'd sheltered during that first storm. It felt like a lifetime ago instead of 6 months. Back then, she'd been terrified and uncertain, but also hopeful. Now she was just tired. Walter found her there an hour later. Cole's tearing himself apart out there, the older man said, settling onto the bench beside her. Broke a fence post with his bare hands. Haven't seen him that upset since his father died. Good, Evelyn said bitterly. He should be upset. He's giving up. Is he? Walter's tone was mild. Or is he trying to protect the people he's responsible for? By sacrificing me. By trying to make an impossible choice between two things he loves. Walter sighed. I've known Cole since he was born. Watched him grow up under the weight of expectation, knowing this ranch would be his responsibility someday. He takes that responsibility seriously, maybe too seriously. To him, protecting this place isn't just about land and cattle. It's about honoring his father's memory, his grandfather's legacy. It's about the families who depend on this operation. And I'm not family? Evelyn's voice cracked. After everything? You are. That's why this is killing him. Walter turned to look at her. But here's what you need to understand. Cole's been carrying this place alone for 5 years, making every decision, bearing every burden. He's not used to having a partner, not used to someone else being willing to share that weight. So when things go bad, his instinct is to protect everyone else by taking the hit himself. Even if it means losing me, especially if it means losing you, because in his mind you're better off without the burden of this fight. Walter shook his head. The man's an idiot when it comes to his own happiness. Always has been. Evelyn wiped her eyes roughly. So what am I supposed to do? Fight for him the way he's been fighting for you. Show him you're not going anywhere, no matter what your father threatens. Make him understand that you're partners. That means you face this together or not at all. She found Cole in the far pasture, supposedly checking fence line, but really just standing there staring at the mountains. Evelyn walked up beside him, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, Cole said finally. What I said, it came out wrong. Did it? Evelyn kept her eyes on the horizon. Or did you mean exactly what you said? That when it comes down to it, the ranch is more important than I am? That's not... Cole turned to face her. Evelyn, this place is everything to me. It's my family's legacy. It's... I know what it is, Evelyn interrupted. I've been working alongside you for 6 months. I know every inch of this land, every head of cattle, every debt and asset and responsibility. I know what it means to you. She finally looked at him. But Cole, I'm not asking you to choose between me and the ranch. I'm asking you to let me stand with you, to trust that we're strong enough together to face whatever my father throws at us. And if we're not, if fighting him bankrupts us, destroys everything, then we rebuild, Evelyn said simply. Together. That's what partners do. Cole stared at her. You'd risk everything, Even knowing you could just walk away, settle with your father, probably get your inheritance back. I don't want his money. I never did. Evelyn moved closer, took his hands in hers. I want this. Us. The life we're building. And yes, my father is going to make that expensive and ugly and hard. But nothing worth having comes easy. You taught me that. Something shifted in Cole's expression, the resignation falling away, replaced by the fierce determination she'd come to recognize. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. We fight. Together. Together. They kissed there in the pasture with the wind picking up and storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and Evelyn felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Richard Mercer's disappointing daughter anymore. She was Evelyn Mercer, rancher and businesswoman and partner to a man who was finally learning he didn't have to carry everything alone. That night, they called Catherine and told her to stop exploring settlement options. They were going to fight, whatever it cost. All right, Catherine said, and Evelyn could hear the approval in her voice. Then let's go on offense. I'm tired of playing defense against your father's threats. Over the next week, Catherine built a case that turned Richard Mercer's strategy inside out. Instead of defending against claims of manipulation, they went after him for harassment and abuse of legal process. They documented every threatening letter, every baseless claim, every expensive legal maneuver designed solely to intimidate. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. Patricia Morrison called Evelyn directly, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. I just got contacted by your father's people. They offered me double what you paid for Uncle Jack's land if I'd testify that the sale was suspicious, that maybe you and Cole had pressured me into accepting your offer. Evelyn's stomach dropped. What did you say? I told them to go to hell, Patricia said bluntly. But then I started thinking, if he's desperate enough to try bribing me into false testimony, what else is he doing? So I made some calls. Turns out I'm not the only one he's approached. Over the next 3 days, Patricia helped Catherine build a file of people Richard Mercer had tried to bribe, intimidate, or manipulate into supporting his case against Evelyn and Cole. Land sellers, business contacts, even former employees of the ranch who'd moved on to other jobs. All of them had been offered money or threatened with vague legal consequences if they didn't cooperate. This is witness tampering, Catherine said, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. This is abuse of process. This is exactly what we need. She filed a motion with the court, attaching sworn statements from everyone Richard had approached. The motion didn't just defend against his claims. It argued that Richard Mercer was engaging in a calculated campaign of harassment against his daughter for the crime of choosing her own life. The response was swift and brutal. A judge ordered Richard to appear for a hearing to explain why he shouldn't be sanctioned for his conduct. His lawyers scrambled to distance themselves from the witness tampering allegations. The private investigator suddenly became unavailable for comment. And then, unexpectedly, Richard Mercer himself called Evelyn. She almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity, the need for closure, maybe just the desire to hear him admit defeat, made her pick up. Evelyn, her father's voice sounded older, tired in a way she'd never heard before. We need to talk. I'm listening. Face to face, tomorrow. There's a cafe in Clearwater. I'll meet you there at noon. Why should I? Because I'm offering to end this, Richard said quietly. No more lawsuits, no more investigators, no more threats. We end it tomorrow, or it goes on forever. Your choice. He hung up before she could respond. Cole wanted to come with her, but Evelyn refused. This is something I need to do alone. Whatever he has to say, I need to hear it without you there as a buffer. I don't like it. I know, but trust me. I can handle my father now. The cafe was small and neutral. Not Evelyn's territory, not Richard's. When she arrived, her father was already there, sitting in a back booth looking profoundly out of place in his expensive suit among the ranchers and farmers in their work clothes. He'd aged, Evelyn realized as she slid into the seat across from him. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his hair grayer. He looked like a man who'd been fighting a war and losing. You look good, Richard said finally. Healthy, strong. Ranch work will do that. Evelyn kept her voice neutral. You said you wanted to end this. So end it. Richard pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Dissolution of all legal actions. Acknowledgement that you're an independent adult capable of making your own decisions. Agreement that I won't pursue any further litigation against you or Bennett Ranch. Evelyn opened the folder, scanned the documents. They said exactly what her father had described, a complete surrender. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. I'm dropping everything. Richard's hands were clasped on the table, and Evelyn noticed they were shaking slightly. My lawyers told me that if I continue this fight, the judge is likely to sanction me. Could damage my business reputation, maybe even lead to ethics complaints. The smart move is to walk away. The smart move, Evelyn repeated. That's all this is? Risk management? Does it matter? Yes, Evelyn said quietly. It matters because for 6 months, you've been trying to destroy my life. Destroy the man I love. Destroy everything I've built. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I refused to obey you. And now you're sitting here telling me you're stopping because it's bad for business? Richard was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. What do you want me to say, Evelyn? That I was wrong? That I should have supported your choices instead of trying to control them? That I drove away my only child because I was too proud to accept that she didn't fit the image I had in my head? That would be a start, Evelyn said, her throat tight. Fine. I was wrong. The words came out like they were being pulled from him. I looked at you and saw failure because you weren't what I wanted you to be. I tried to force you into a mold that would benefit my business, my reputation, without caring what it cost you. And when you finally stood up to me, I tried to break you rather than admit I'd been a terrible father. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Why are you telling me this now? Because my lawyers compiled a witness list for the hearing. People who would testify about my character, my business practices, my treatment of you over the years. Richard's jaw clenched. Do you know what I saw when I read those statements? A pattern of cruelty. Of using people and discarding them when they stopped being useful. Of prioritizing profit and control over basic human decency. He looked at her directly for the first time. I saw myself through other people's eyes, and I hated what I saw. My own daughter, who I should have protected and supported, afraid of me. Working herself to exhaustion on a ranch just to prove she wasn't the failure I'd always told her she was. His voice cracked slightly. And succeeding, building something real with someone who saw her value, while I sat in my office trying to destroy it because I couldn't stand being proven wrong. Evelyn didn't know what to say. This wasn't the father she knew, the cold, controlled businessman who never admitted weakness. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Richard continued. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking you to sign these papers so I can stop causing you harm, so you can build your life without me trying to tear it down. Evelyn picked up the pen he'd placed on the table. She should feel triumphant. Her father was surrendering, admitting fault, giving her everything she'd fought for. But instead, she just felt sad. What happens after I sign this? She asked. I go back to my life. You go back to yours. We don't have to see each other again if you don't want to. And if I do want to? The question surprised her even as she asked it. What if someday I want you to meet Cole, see the ranch, understand what we've built? Richard looked stunned. Why would you want that? Because you're still my father, Evelyn said quietly. A terrible one, yes. Controlling and cruel and more worried about your reputation than my happiness. But you're the only father I have. And maybe, if you actually meant what you said about being wrong, maybe there's a chance you could learn to be different. I don't know if I can be, Richard admitted. I've spent my whole life measuring worth in profit margins and power plays. I don't know how to value things that don't fit on a balance sheet. Then learn, Evelyn said. Come visit the ranch sometime. Not now. We both need time. But eventually, see what Cole built without crushing anyone to do it. See what I've become when I'm not trying to be what you wanted. And maybe you'll understand that there are different ways to measure success. She signed the papers, each signature feeling like closing a door and opening a window simultaneously. When she finished, she slid them back across the table. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said clearly. What you did, trying to destroy my happiness because your ego was bruised, that's going to take years to get past, if I ever do. But I'm willing to leave the door open. Not for your sake. For mine. Because holding on to anger at you gives you power over me, and I'm done giving you power. Richard took the papers with trembling hands. You've become formidable, he said, something like pride flickering across his face. Bennett's a lucky man. I'm the lucky one, Evelyn corrected. He gave me room to become formidable. That's worth more than all the money you ever made. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. My mother, you never talk about her, but I know she left you when I was young. Did she leave because of how you treated her? The same way you treated me? Richard's face went pale. Yes, he said finally. She told me I was going to destroy our daughter the same way I'd destroyed her. I told her she was being dramatic. She left anyway, and I spent the next 20 years proving her right. Where is she now? I don't know. She asked me not to contact her, and I honored that much at least. He met Evelyn's eyes. But if you want to try to find her, I have a PI who could… No, Evelyn said firmly. If she wants to be found, she knows where to look. I'm not going to invade her privacy the way you invaded mine. She left the cafe without looking back, climbed into her truck, a newer model she and Cole had purchased last month for ranch business, and drove back toward home. The sky was clear, the late autumn sun warmed through the windshield, and Evelyn felt lighter than she had in months. It was over. Actually, over. Cole was waiting on the porch when she pulled up. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he stood slightly forward like he was ready to fight whatever battle came next. It's done, Evelyn said, climbing the steps. He dropped everything, signed papers agreeing to leave us alone. The relief that flooded Cole's face was visceral. Just like that? Just like that. She handed him the folder to review. His lawyers convinced him he'd lose, that continuing would damage his reputation. So he surrendered. Cole read through the documents carefully, his legal training showing as he checked every clause. Finally, he looked up. This is real. He actually backed down. He did more than that. He admitted he was wrong. Evelyn settled into the chair beside him. I don't know if he meant it, or if he was just trying to salvage what's left of his relationship with me. But he said it, acknowledged that he tried to break me because I wouldn't obey him. How do you feel? Evelyn considered the question. Relieved, sad, hopeful, maybe. I told him that someday, if he proves he can change, maybe he could visit. See what we've built. Cole raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? No, but I'm sure that holding on to anger at him only hurts me, and I'm tired of letting him take up space in my head. She reached for Cole's hand. I want to focus on us, on the ranch, on building something good instead of fighting something bad. Then that's what we'll do. Cole pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. The next 6 months passed in a blur of growth and change. With the legal battle resolved, they could finally focus on expanding the operation. The Morrison property integration went smoothly, adding significant capacity to their breeding program. Evelyn's marketing initiatives started paying off. They had buyers from 4 states now, some willing to pay premium prices for Bennett genetics. In the spring, they hired 3 new ranch hands to manage the expanded operation. Evelyn took charge of training them and discovered she had a talent for teaching, breaking down complex ranch operations into understandable steps, the way Cole and Walter had done for her. Walter, watching her work with a young hand who was struggling with cattle handling, shook his head with a smile. Remember when you showed up here in heels and a fancy dress, terrified of the cows? I prefer not to, Evelyn said, but she was grinning. You've come a long way, Miss Evelyn. Your father, wherever he is, he's missing out on watching his daughter become someone remarkable. The comment made her think. She hadn't heard from Richard since that day in the cafe. Part of her wondered if he ever thought about her, if he regretted how things had ended. But mostly, she was too busy living to worry about it. Then on a warm June evening, a car pulled up the drive. Not a Mercedes this time, a more modest sedan. And the man who emerged wasn't Richard Mercer. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt that said business professional but not trying too hard. He approached the porch where Evelyn and Cole were reviewing the day's work. Evelyn Mercer? He asked. That's me. Can I help you? My name is David Chen. I'm your father's executive assistant. He pulled out an envelope. He asked me to deliver this personally. Evelyn took the envelope warily. Why didn't he come himself? He said you'd probably prefer it this way. Less pressure. David's expression was carefully neutral. For what it's worth, I've worked for Mr. Mercer for 8 years, and I've never seen him like he's been these past few months. Whatever happened between you two, it changed something in him. After David left, Evelyn opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, not typed, in her father's precise script. Evelyn, I am not good at apologies, as you know. I am better at building things than maintaining them, better at acquiring than nurturing. These are flaws I am trying to correct, though I suspect I am too old and set in my ways to fully succeed. I have been watching from a distance, not intrusively. I promised I would leave you alone, and I have kept that promise. But business circles talk, and I hear things. About Bennett Ranch's expansion, about a young woman partner who has transformed their market presence, about innovative breeding programs and distribution networks that have other ranchers scrambling to keep up. I hear about you, in other words. And every report makes me more aware of what I threw away when I tried to force you into a mold you were never meant to fit. You told me I could visit someday if I learned to be different. I'm not there yet. I may never be. But I'm trying. I sold the company last month. Mercer Development is now under new ownership. I kept enough money to live comfortably and gave the rest to charities focused on helping young women escape controlling family situations. It felt appropriate. I'm learning to measure success differently. It is harder than any business deal I ever negotiated. If you're willing, I would like to meet Cole. Not now, I understand I need to earn that right. But perhaps next year when I have had more time to become someone worthy of being called your father. Until then, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I should have said it years ago, should have been saying it your whole life. You are everything I taught you not to be, kind, collaborative, willing to build people up instead of tearing them down, and you are better for it. Be happy, Evelyn. You deserve it. Your father, Richard. Evelyn read the letter twice, then handed it to Cole without a word. She watched him read, saw his eyebrows raise at certain parts. He sold his company, Cole said finally. That's his entire identity. I know. Think he means it? About trying to change? I don't know, Evelyn admitted. But he took the first step. That's something. Cole handed back the letter. What are you going to do? Nothing right now. Let him prove he means it. Maybe next year, like he said, we'll see where he is. She folded the letter carefully. But Cole, I think I want to try. Not for him, for me. So I can look back in 20 years and know I gave him the chance to be better. Then we'll try, Cole said simply. Together. The word had become their anchor. Together. Through storms and legal battles, through expansion and growth, through fear and triumph. Together. That fall, they got married. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony at the ranch with Walter officiating and a handful of friends and neighboring ranchers attending. Evelyn wore a simple white dress and her work boots. Cole wore new jeans and a pressed shirt and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. You ready for this? He asked as they stood before Walter, the sun setting orange and gold behind them. I've been ready since you first told me I was worth something, Evelyn said. The vows were traditional but felt revolutionary, to honor and cherish in good times and bad, as equals and partners. To build a life rooted in respect and trust instead of control and fear. When Walter pronounced them married, the small crowd cheered. Someone had brought champagne. There was food and music and dancing on the porch while the stars came out. Later, much later, Evelyn and Cole stood at the edge of the porch watching the last guests leave, Walter's cabin lights flickering on as he headed to bed. What are you thinking? Cole asked. That a year ago I was a different person. Scared and small and convinced I was worthless. Evelyn leaned against him. And now I'm standing here on land I help manage, married to a man who sees me as an equal, looking at a future I actually want. Your father tried to break you by sending you here. Instead, he freed me. Evelyn smiled. Ironic, isn't it? His attempt at punishment became the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. The chance to discover who I actually am when I'm not performing for someone else's approval. Cole turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. And who are you, Evelyn Bennett? She'd taken his name, another choice that was hers to make. It felt right, not erasing who she'd been, but claiming who she'd become. I'm a rancher, she said, a businesswoman, a wife, a partner in every sense of the word. I'm someone who works hard and builds things and treats people with dignity. She met his eyes. I'm strong, not perfect, not unbreakable, but strong enough to face whatever comes next. Your father and grandfather built this ranch with their hands and their determination. We're going to keep building it together. Together, Cole agreed, and kissed her under the vast western sky. 2 years later, the ranch had doubled in size. They'd acquired 3 adjacent properties, hired a dozen employees, and built a reputation as one of the premier breeding operations in the region. Evelyn managed the business side while Cole oversaw operations, and their partnership had become the template for how they did everything. Walter retired, sort of. He still showed up every morning to offer advice and criticism in equal measure, but he'd moved into a smaller cottage on the property and spent his days training the next generation of ranch hands. And one afternoon in early spring, a familiar sedan pulled up the drive. Evelyn was in the office going over supply contracts when David Chen appeared at the door. But this time Richard Mercer was with him. Her father looked different. Older, yes, but also softer somehow. He wore slacks and a simple shirt. Expensive, but not ostentatious. And when he looked at her, there was uncertainty in his eyes instead of the cold assessment she remembered. "Hello, Evelyn," he said quietly. "Father." She stood but didn't move toward him. "This is a surprise. I should have called, but I thought—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. "I thought if I called, you might say no. And I needed to see you, to see this place, to understand what you've built." Cole appeared in the doorway, and Evelyn saw her father's spine straighten automatically, a businessman's instinct to assess potential threats. But Cole's expression was neutral, waiting for Evelyn's lead. "Cole, this is my father, Richard Mercer. Father, this is my husband, Cole Bennett." The 2 men shook hands, and Evelyn watched her father's reaction. She saw him notice Cole's calloused hands, the evidence of real work. Saw him take in the confident bearing, the way Cole stood beside Evelyn instead of in front of her. "Bennett," Richard said, "I owe you an apology. The things I said about you, the assumptions I made, were wrong," Cole finished. "Yeah, they were, but you figured that out eventually. That's something." There was a moment of tense silence. Then Richard said, "Would you show me around? The ranch, I mean. I'd like to understand what you've built here." Evelyn and Cole exchanged a glance. Then Evelyn nodded. "All right, but Father, this isn't a social call. If you're here to judge or criticize, I'm here to learn," Richard interrupted. "Nothing more." They spent the next 3 hours walking the property. Richard asked questions, genuinely interested questions about breeding programs, land management, market strategies. He listened when Evelyn explained the expansion they'd undertaken, the innovations they'd implemented. He watched her interact with the ranch hands, saw the respect they showed her. At one point, watching Evelyn negotiate with a cattle buyer over the phone, firm but fair, getting the price she wanted while maintaining the relationship, Richard turned to Cole. "She's remarkable," he said quietly. "Yeah, she is," Cole agreed. "Always was. You just never looked." "I know." Richard's voice was rough. "I spent 23 years trying to make her something she wasn't, and it took losing her completely to realize what I had." They ended the tour at the house. Walter had apparently been watching from his cottage, because he appeared with coffee and the homemade cookies he'd started baking in retirement. Over coffee, Richard finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I sold the company because I realized I'd built my entire life around acquiring things, land, money, power. But I'd never built anything that mattered. Never created anything that would outlast me in a way that was actually worth remembering." He looked at Evelyn. "You did. You took a successful ranch and made it exceptional. You built a partnership based on mutual respect instead of control. You're creating something that will last." "It wasn't just me," Evelyn said. "Cole and Walter did most of the hard work." "Don't," her father interrupted gently. "Don't diminish what you've accomplished. I did that to you for too long. Own your success, Evelyn. You earned it." The words settled over her like a blessing she hadn't known she needed. Before he left, Richard pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is the deed to your mother's old family property in Montana. 300 acres. She left it to you in her will. I had my lawyers track her down to settle some legal matters, and we discovered she passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Evelyn felt her chest constrict. "She's dead? I'm sorry. I know you wanted to find her someday. Wanted to know her." Richard's expression was pained. "She left you the land and a letter. I haven't read it. That's between you and her. But Evelyn, she was proud of you. The lawyers said she'd been following your life from a distance, same as I was. She knew what you'd accomplished here. Evelyn took the envelope with shaking hands. Thank you for telling me. It's the least I could do. Richard stood to leave, then paused. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to suddenly become a normal family. But I would like to try to be a better father than I was. If you'll let me. One step at a time, Evelyn said. Visit occasionally. Show me you mean it. We'll see where it goes. That's more than I deserve, Richard said. Thank you. After he left, Evelyn sat with the envelope containing her mother's letter. Cole settled beside her, not pushing, just present. You want me to leave you alone? He asked. No, stay. She opened the envelope with careful fingers. The letter was short, written in a flowing script Evelyn didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, I am gone, and I am sorry I never had the courage to contact you while I was alive. I left when you were young because I could not bear to watch your father do to you what he did to me. Try to reshape you into something convenient rather than celebrate who you actually were. I watched from afar. I know you probably resent that, but I was afraid that if I came back into your life, your father would use me against you somehow. So I stayed away and I watched, and I saw you survive him. I saw you escape him. I saw you build something beautiful and real with a man who values you properly. I am so proud of you, my daughter. You became everything I hoped you would be. Strong, capable, true to yourself even when it cost you everything. The Montana property was my family's ranch, the place I was happiest before I married your father. I want you to have it. Use it, sell it, let it sit, whatever feels right. But know that it comes with my love and my pride and my deepest wish that you live the life I was too afraid to claim for myself. Be brave, Evelyn. You already are. But be brave anyway. Build the life you want, not the life someone else designs for you. All my love, your mother, Catherine. Evelyn read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Cole held her while she cried, for the mother she'd never really known, for the relationship they'd never had, for the woman who'd been brave enough to leave but not brave enough to come back. She was proud of me, Evelyn said finally. Of course she was, Cole said. You're extraordinary. Anyone who bothered to look could see that. That summer, they drove to Montana to see the property. It was beautiful, rolling grassland with a creek running through it, mountains in the distance, a small house that needed work but had good bones. They spent a week there, making plans. We could use it as a satellite operation, Cole suggested. Different climate, different market, could diversify our breeding program. Or we could keep it as a family place, Evelyn countered. Somewhere to go when we need distance from the day-to-day operations. Or both, Cole said, pulling her close. We're good at both. They compromised, as they always did. The Montana property became a seasonal operation. They ran cattle there in the summer, used it as a retreat in the winter. It was another piece of their expanding empire, but also a connection to Evelyn's mother, a way of honoring the woman who'd given her roots, even if she couldn't be there in person. 5 years after Evelyn first arrived at Bennett Ranch, they stood on the porch of the main house watching the sun set. The ranch had grown to over 20,000 acres. They employed 30 people year-round, more during busy seasons. Their genetics program was considered one of the best in the country, and they'd built it together, brick by brick, decision by decision. Walter had passed away the previous winter, peaceful in his sleep, with a lifetime of good work behind him. They'd scattered his ashes on the property he'd helped build, and Evelyn still sometimes expected to see him walking out of the barn with advice nobody asked for but everyone needed. Richard visited quarterly now. He'd never be perfect, would never fully overcome a lifetime of valuing profit over people. But he tried. He learned their hands' names, asked about their families. He offered business advice when asked and kept quiet when it wasn't. And sometimes, watching Evelyn work, he'd get this look on his face, regret mixed with pride, that said he was finally beginning to understand what he'd almost destroyed. What are you thinking about? Cole asked, his arm around her waist. How different my life is from what I thought it would be, Evelyn said. How my father sent me here to break me, and instead I found the place I was always meant to be. No regrets? Not even one. She leaned into him, watching the sky turn gold and orange and purple. Sometimes I think about that scared girl who showed up here in heels and a fancy dress, thinking her life was over. And I want to tell her that it's just beginning, that the punishment she's dreading is actually salvation. She wouldn't have believed you, Cole said. No, she had to live it to understand. Evelyn smiled. Had to learn that strength isn't about being perfect or controlled. It's about being willing to get dirty, to fail, to try again, to build something real instead of maintaining a beautiful illusion. Cole turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You know what I think? I think you would have found your way eventually, with or without this place. Because the strength was always in you. You just needed permission to use it. Maybe, Evelyn said. But this place gave me more than permission. It gave me purpose. It gave me you. It gave me proof that I was worth more than I'd been told my whole life. You were always worth everything, Cole said fiercely. I just helped you see it. They kissed as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible but were absolutely real. Below them, the ranch spread out in all directions. Land they'd fought for, cattle they'd raised, a legacy they were building together. Evelyn had learned something in the years since leaving her father's world. Real power wasn't about control or domination. It was about creating space for things to grow. Real success wasn't measured in money or status. It was measured in lives improved, in relationships honored, in land well stewarded and passed on better than you found it. Her father had tried to teach her that worth came from appearance, from connections, from being what other people wanted. But this ranch, this life, this man beside her, they'd taught her the truth. Worth came from showing up, from doing the work even when it was hard, from treating people with dignity and building something that mattered. The frontier had stripped away every lie she'd been told about herself. In the harshest place imaginable, she'd discovered that she was capable of far more than anyone, including herself, had believed. And in doing so, she'd built a life richer than anything money could buy. The woman who'd arrived here broken and afraid was gone. In her place stood Evelyn Bennett, rancher, businesswoman, wife, and living proof that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who fall, get up, and keep building anyway. As darkness settled over the ranch and the first stars appeared overhead, Evelyn felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This was home. This was family. This was the life she'd chosen, fought for, and earned. And it was exactly enough.